Hi, everybody, and thank you, Amber, and thank you all for joining us, and especially for coming out on behalf of this really urgent project that we'll probably be involved in for the rest of our lives, actively or passively. So I'm glad and honored to be with you all this evening, and if any of you are still having doubts about priorities or purpose, look no further. The urgency is at our doorstep. And that said, I don't think any of us was expecting to find ourselves on the bleeding edge of epochal climatic change. But we are, and no matter where we live, we have a front row seat to this future. I don't need to tell you about the world-changing energy our fossil fuel-powered economy has loosed upon the world, even as it enables the unprecedented lifestyle we're still trying to enjoy. It is taking those gains away, endangering all the beings who enjoy fire-prone, hydrocarbon-rich areas like the ones in which we live. The situation is quantifiably different now. Maybe you've heard people say, yeah, we've always had bad fires. That's true, but not this bad and not this often. What we're seeing here is a slide of California megafires. And this runs from 1930 to the present. Between 1930 and the year 2000, you see those gray columns. Those are some pretty big fires, but they happened every decade or so. We cross into 2000 and look at these red bars. There are too many megafires to even chart properly. The LA fires that devastated vast swaths of downtown Los Angeles last January, that fire didn't even rank on this chart. So we're seeing similar fire growth in Canada. And like Russia, North Korea, Florida, Texas, and the province of Alberta, the United States government now refuses to acknowledge the grave risk posed by fossil fuel emissions, principally CO2 and methane, and it's actively reversing and undermining efforts to decarbonize our energy and transportation sectors. In so doing, Washington is endangering our lives, and it's also handing the future of energy, which is renewables, to China, who's installing more than 1 gigawatt of wind and solar every day. As big oil supercharges our economy and its own bottom line with record profits, it's also supercharging our atmosphere with record quantities of greenhouse gases. Next. This is the Keeling curve. We've all seen it. The reason this is happening, the reason we're seeing this rapid increase in CO2, unprecedented in this time span, can be summarized in one word, and that word is fire. And I don't mean wildfire, I mean fossil fuels. One way to understand capitalism as it is currently practiced is as a global Ponzi scheme powered by fossil fuels and leveraged against the future of the living world. In light of this, the most accurate way to calculate the debt on this system of fossil fuel powered, which is to say fire-powered civilization, is by measuring CO2. Next. So if we understand excess CO2 as debt, then excess heat is the interest on that debt. So these are global land and sea temperatures averaged out over the past 150 years. We see on the left, 1850. The 19th century was really a relatively cool century. We see it wavering through the early 1900s. That's what climate normally does. And then we see it start to march upward around 1970. And it hasn't stopped. And look at 2023. Look at that red bar at the very edge there. It took a big jump. So starting around 2000, when CO2 levels were approaching 370 parts per million, the rate of global temperature rise accelerated, becoming more noticeable to the general public. What thermometers, fire behavior, and our own bodies are telling us is that our CO2 debt level has become unsustainable, and the interest, that is the heat, unpayable, to the point that we now find ourselves in the default zone. And I know none of you has ever done this, but typically when we default on a loan, the bank calls in the debt. They might even repossess your stuff. And this is one way to understand the steady increase in fossil fuel enhanced weather disasters. These floods, fires, heat waves, and intensifying storms are the bank of nature's repo men coming to collect on that debt, repossessing our homes, our cars, our towns, even our very lives. Next slide. So this is billion-dollar weather disasters over the last 40 years in the United States. And you can see it follows the same track as CO2 rise and temperature rise. These are all interconnected dynamics. A more positive and forward-looking way to interpret this moment, though, is as a stern invitation to mature out of petroleum-powered, AI-enhanced capitalism's dangerous delusion that A, nature is some kind of bottomless trust fund that we can draw on at will with no consequences, and B, that we are somehow in charge. I don't care what business you're in, virtual or actual, nature owns 51% of it, at least. Until we recognize the natural world as more than a full partner in everything we do, she will continue to remind us in progressively more violent ways, and she will continue collecting on that debt. So let's be clear, coal, still widely used, is an 18th century fuel. Oil, which still drives about 80% of the world's economic activity, is a 19th century fuel. The internal combustion engine was prototyped in 1860. Standard Oil, Esso, Exxon, Imperial in Canada, was founded in 1870. Bitumen, what they're mining and melting up in Fort McMurray, is not a fuel at all. It's a driveway sealer. It takes billions of cubic feet of natural gas every day to melt and fractionate bitumen into substances American refineries are able to render. So why on earth are we still doing this? Especially when scientists have understood the basics of the greenhouse effect literally since the 18th century. We've understood the heat-retaining qualities of CO2 since the 1850s. Scientists were speculating on industrial CO2's potential for altering the climate in the 1890s. What's alarming and probably indictable is the fact that petroleum companies have known this for more than 50 years. In fact, they've been leaders in climate science, but this presented a quandary. How do you separate oil from fire or burning from emissions? You can't. And so starting in the 1980s, the industry embarked on a disinformation campaign to disavow and undermine their own science. And they've been doing it ever since. Next. Here's the strategy in a nutshell. This term was coined by Alex Steffen, a really powerful futurist working out of Berkeley. I urge you to acquaint yourself with his work. Predatory delay, as he describes it, is the deliberate slowing of change in order to prolong a profitable but unsustainable status quo whose costs will be borne by others. So this begs a question every one of us should be asking our prime minister, our premiers, our mayors, our bosses, our clergy, and ourselves. How is it not a crime to knowingly, willfully, enthusiastically sabotage the future as the petroleum industry and its colluding investors and governments are doing now? Why would someone do that? John Kenneth Galbraith, born in Canada, but a US economist, ambassador, and author, wrote, "People of privilege will risk their complete destruction rather than surrender any material part of their advantage." The Fort McMurray fire occurred in 2016, which was then the hottest year in recorded history. But last year, 2024, was hotter still. This year, atmospheric CO2 levels exceeded 430 parts per million for the first time in about 10 million years. The longer major economies, not to mention our personal finances and transportation choices, remain hostage to the fossil fuel industry, which is currently trying to weaken protections for oil workers in dangerously hot conditions, the worse these fires, floods, heat waves, and droughts are going to get. The busier the Red Cross is going to be, and the more evacuations, heartbreak, and PTSD we and our neighbors are going to suffer. There's no getting around the fact that this is a particularly dark period in our shared history, and it underscores the relatively liberally inclined stability in which we've spent most of our lives, especially in Canada. But we're now witnessing that order breaking down in real time as the US devolves into a cynical caricature of zero-sum, devil take the hindmost, libertarian neoliberalism, more closely aligned with Russia than with Europe. While their machinations have no doubt enhanced some of your pensions and stock portfolios, the American right and its allies in Canada have been working for decades to undermine the post-war idealism so many of us have enjoyed and perhaps deluded ourselves with ever since Reagan took office. We now have to face the hard fact that the US is no longer an ally or a model, that it's run by people who not only don't care if we die or if the planet dies, but who are engineering increased mortality across all species and habitats. As a result, the nation of Canada now exists in a similar precarity to the environmental movement, a strange irony for a nation built on and maintained by the crudest forms of extraction. Canada, too, is going to have to find new allies and a new way forward. But so far, Carney, a very smart man who I'm sure knows better, is letting the oil and gas industry, a longtime ally and enabler of tyrannical governments, heavily influence his agenda. But all is not well in the oil and gas industry. This is from the International Energy Agency. Global oil demand growth is set to slow to a halt by the end of the decade. So next slide, please. You might not see it if you live in Canada, but the energy transition is fully underway. We are, to this end, we have to recognize and ideally include allies who may not look or feel like typical allies. So this is just in the past 3 years, China has laid on a vast, three-figure amounts of terawatts. The United States is way behind. Canada is not even on this list, but what this indicates, a terawatt is 1 trillion watts. Terawatts are what you power Tokyo with, what you power New York City with. It's an extraordinary amount of energy. And so to install that much energy, to activate that much energy just in the past 3 years should indicate to all of us that we are in an historic energy transition. Next slide, please. Again, in terms of look for your allies, they're not always in where you expect them to be. Texas is kind of the first cousin, if not the twin sister, to Alberta. Alberta has actively shut down renewable energy projects, some of them financed by Texas, who it's now alienated. Texas, meanwhile, leads not only the country, but the entire continent in renewable energy rollout. It's kind of amazing. Let's see the next slide, please. This is the price of solar panels per watt. Starting from around 2010, it was about $1.40 a watt, and now the price is negligible. There's really nothing cheaper. You can't buy bubblegum cheaper than that. Next slide, please. Again, batteries are also going through an extraordinary revolution right now. This is the past 30 years. We see on the left the cost of the battery, that green line running down almost to zero on the right. Meanwhile, the effective kilowatts per kilogram of energy, of watt hours per kilogram is cresting upward rapidly. And this, we have to remember, we are just at the beginning of this process. Next slide, please. And this is something we need to see and understand, because Canada can do this too. the UK, Britain, was the first fossil fuel-powered superpower. They did it on the back of coal. And most of us grew up associating UK energy and even UK culture, UK air, with coal. And now, in 2024, they closed down their last coal-powered energy plant. And this is, the UK, the kind of the OG of fossil fuel burning G7 nations. It is now completely off coal. Well, we could get off bitumen. We could get off oil and gas. So these are things that, one last slide just to show you some of the benefits of this. Yeah, so this is over the past 150 years. These are UK emissions. Fell another 6% in 2023, but they're now at their lowest, if you look at that graph, since 1879. This is per capita CO2 emissions. So this is cataclysmic change of a good kind. And if the UK can do it, Canada can do it. China's already in that process. Their emissions, which have been spiraling upward for the past 3 decades, are now plateauing and set to descend because they've laid on so much new wind and solar. What I'd like to close with is this. I think most of us here have a clear idea of what wealth is, especially older folks who are retired and trying to enjoy their retirement. And we have a sense of what wealth means, but I want to offer an alternative definition. Wealth is not having to pack a go bag. It's not having to run for your life. It's not having to explain to your kids why they had to or why they might have to in the future. Wealth is not having to hear your children tell you that the reason they're not having kids is because they have no confidence in their elders to maintain a safe and stable climate. To be clear, we are not going to buy, drill, AI, or Mad Max our way out of this. We're going to have to reimagine our way out, reevaluate our way out, transition our way out, reduce our way out, and love our way out. Using the bullhorns of destructive weather and hemisphere-spanning heat and wildfire smoke, nature bellows our interconnectedness and roars our interdependence. No matter how big our reservoirs or bank accounts are, we cannot protect ourselves or our beloved country if we don't protect the ecosystems they depend on, which means, first and foremost, cooling them down. In other words, decarbonizing. We have the templates. Right now, it is technically possible to have stability and abundance. Solar is the cheapest energy ever invented. Paired with battery storage, its potential is effectively infinite. So much of what we're seeing is legitimately discouraging, but this doesn't make significant climate action any less urgent or any less possible. I've been traveling with fire weather for more than 2 years now, and I can assure you, we are not alone. Our toxic new reality presents movements like this with high stakes, now or never motivation, and also with some hard but potentially liberating choices. Because we cannot depend on institutions to support us, we're going to have to do it ourselves, from the ground up, in creative and radical ways. Luckily, we're not the first people to do this. From labor movements to the Black American Freedom Riders, meaningful change has always been hard won. There's a lot that we can learn from them. And one of the features of the American Civil Rights Movement's Freedom Riders, which has become a model for nonviolent protest around the world, is how it brought young and old together, deploying each age group to best advantage. In order to be successful, we must do this too. To this end, what if Draw the Line evolved into a general climate strike? What if institutions are no longer responsive to the most urgent needs of the day? Let's get their attention by shutting them down. Bill McKibben, in conjunction with 350.org and Third Act, has created effective contemporary models for how to do this, but clearly we must go further. We must go harder. To this end, let's make September 20th Draw the Line an historic event. There's never been a clearer or more urgent case for mass action. It's not just us, and it's not just our children and grandchildren. The lives of all beings are on the line here. Friends, the writing's on the wall, and it takes the form of a question. Are we going to go down, clinging to a 20th century status quo, in servitude to fire? Or are we going to evolve using our collective brilliance, our capacity for collective action, our abundant gifts for invention, connection, and influence to lower the temperature, to recognize actively what makes life worth living? Indeed, what makes our lives possible at all. So let's draw the line together on September 20. Thank you very much. So glad to be with you. Thanks a lot.
So there are lots of questions for you, for sure. Let me start with one. What are your thoughts on the media's reporting of wildfires? Carleton's Institute Reclimate found that only 13% of wildfire news stories mention climate change, and 10% mention actually fossil fuels and their role. Can the media be encouraged in some way to link climate change and fossil fuels to wildfires we are seeing now, and how? How well do you think they're handling this issue?
Well, it's really a shame that we have to increasingly go to alternative media for straight answers on things that matter most to us. It's well known, especially in Canada, that major media, mainstream media, is fairly captive. And I've been even reprimanded by editors at the Globe and Mail for my op-eds. When they publish something of mine that is connecting the dots between fossil fuels and climate and fire, they get pressure. And they're tactful about it. They know where their bread is buttered, which side it's buttered on. But there are owners, and those owners play golf with other owners, and they protect each other. And so I don't think they're doing as good a job as they could do. And when you look at the mayhem these events are causing, and not just the fire, the fact that the smoke, P2 particles, which are abundant in wildfire smoke, are really, really toxic for everybody. Doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. Doesn't matter, apparently, what country you're in, or even what continent you're on, because that smoke will get to you. And wildfire smoke was arguably Canada's greatest export, after fossil fuels, all summer long. And that is, really, really problematic. And we are not being served right now by the media or our government, frankly.
Thank you, John. Here's a question about interprovincial relations and the importance of really working together. Canada is going to need all provinces to cooperate to meet climate and emissions reduction targets. And Saskatchewan is budgeting $1 billion over the next 4 years to refurbish coal-fired plants to extend their life. And other provinces like Alberta are also moving in their direction. So without consensus, how can Canada achieve their climate goals? And that's been a perennial problem.
We are going to need a prime minister who was as brave as Chrétien was when he refused to join the coalition of the willing and invade Iraq. That was hugely costly for Chrétien to turn down our oldest friend who was in need and needed to invade Iraq. And now he looks like a genius. That war was a 20-year quagmire that took hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives, and the place is still in disarray. And that was, I don't know if any other prime minister, but besides Chrétien, would have had the backbone to resist that pressure. Well, we need a prime minister like that right now who can resist the pressure of the fossil fuel industry. And right now, when you see the model that the US is making, is demonstrating, which is, complete insane denial of what's happening. from the energy secretary to the president, completely living and arguing for a parallel reality that does not exist around the lack of a need for climate action and the disconnect, in their view, between fossil fuels and what is happening to our world in real time. So there's bona fide madness in the policy now. And Carney has an extraordinarily difficult job, and I have a lot of sympathy for him because we have to maintain a relationship with the United States. But that doesn't mean we have to go to war with them in Iraq, and it doesn't mean we have to go to war with them on climate science and on climate action. And that's where finding new alliances, as Carney has been actively doing and bravely doing, with Europe and with other liberal democracies that recognize the threat fossil fuels pose, is a step in the right direction. But Canada is built on, as I said, the crudest forms of extraction, and fossil fuel has been central to that, but it's not central anymore. And that's where we really have to move past the myth of the idea that we can't survive without the petroleum industry. Alberta has shed 40,000 jobs in the petroleum industry over the past decade and a half. They've increased production, but it's a production of bitumen. And bitumen is, as we know, a degraded form of petroleum that requires a lot of intervention and a lot of additional energy to make it even saleable at a discount. Meanwhile, solar is the cheapest energy ever conceived, and it is abundant, it's infinite. And this is something that I wish more people would talk about. There is no richer country than Canada in terms of per capita energy potential. We are an energy superpower. We are what Harper fantasized about us being, but it could be that we could do that for renewable energy. We have infinite wind, infinite solar, infinite geothermal, 3 oceans of potential tidal, and a huge amount of hydro. And we have a bottomless market just over the border. So we could, with courage and zeal, we could lead the way for the North American continent into 21st century energy. China's leading the way right now, and we could even partner with them conceivably. I don't think we would have to directly, but there's so much Canada could do and be, and instead we're holding out and still hostage to the 20th century. And that was a long time ago now.
I very much hope you get to talk to Mr. Carney directly and encourage him. Here's a question that people have wanted me to ask. In the Reckoning section of your book, you refer to the Lucretius premise that humans have difficulty to not use the past as a sure predictor of the future. Canada appears to be on the cusp of changing our fire response processes in light of the major fires recently. From what you hear of projected changes, are they adequate to meet wildfire conditions now or future conditions? Are we being adequately creative?
So that, first of all, to be kind to human beings, is a good place to start. And we should be patient with ourselves that it is reasonable to base future responses on past experience. That's how we learn. But when we see the evidence for more extreme possibilities, which climate scientists have been sharing with us for 50 years now, that we can expect bigger fires than we've ever seen, worse droughts than we've ever seen, more violent storms than we've ever seen. We know this, and we have it on very good authority. So to this end, one thing that I think Canada should be justifiably proud of is our low fatality rate when it comes to wildfires. Look at California, look at Lahaina, look at what the terrible tragedy in Turkey. They lost 10 or 12 fire responders just last month. That imagine if that had happened in Canada, if we'd lost 10 wildfire fighters in a single fire. It would be devastating. And so what we have shown is a value for human life, but also a precautionary principle where we have evacuated, in most cases, citizens and wildfire fighters so that they can live to fight and love another day. So that's really positive. So that is one area where I think we are learning from the Lucretius problem and moving into the future in a proactive way. But the bottom line is we are not prepared for the fires of the near future. And what we're asking of firefighters is, I believe, unreasonable and frankly impossible. By leaning into the fossil fuel industry, by leaning into generating more emissions, we are creating a situation in the forest of unfightable fires. Too hot, too dry for humans or any of their machines to respond to in meaningful ways. We saw that in Fort McMurray. We saw that in Los Angeles. We saw that in Lahaina. And this is just the beginning. So I really feel for and have deep sympathy for firefighters. I'm an advocate for a national firefighting service, but that has to be in conjunction with a national climate program. And Canada, because of the terrible fires we've experienced, we're kind of a poster child for the future of fire. So we have a lot of credibility when we, as G7 members, go before other international bodies and organizations and conferences and say, listen, we know what the future looks like, and we need to decarbonize. We need to cool this place down. And Turkey and the whole Eastern Mediterranean is going through literal hell right now. Some of the worst fires they've ever had. France, Spain, I think, had the worst fire season it's ever had. It's having its black summer. We had ours in 2023. This past fire season, 2025, was the second worst in Canadian history. This should tell us something. This should tell our leaders something. These are not aberrations. These are not freak events. These are not things that happened in the past. This is our future if we don't lean into it. And Chrétien, when he said Canada is not going to go to war in Iraq, he may have seen the future too, because Canada would still be there 20 years later, fighting someone else's war. Well, in a sense, we're fighting someone else's war right now too, but we also have leverage and standing on the world stage where we can help redirect that. And what's excellent about this is that we have allies in the sense that there is tremendous renewable energy development already underway, even south of the border, and the oil and gas industry is on the wane. Everybody knows that. So let's move into the 21st century and own it. Wouldn't that be exciting if Canada did that?
Very exciting, yes. I think we're just about there, but we're still keeping track of all the Q's and A's, and they're being answered as well behind the scenes. But I have one question. Out of the many powerful insights in fire and weather, is there one key takeaway you would most like our audience to remember?
Well, I've been thinking about love a lot. And I've been traveling for 2.5 years. I've been around the world talking about fire weather. A lot of people want to talk about it in all kinds of languages. And they're there because they love this world. They're not there for me. They're not there for Canada. They're there because they could see what Canada went through. They could see what Fort McMurray went through. And because of the fires that are burning now in so many different countries, they're feeling that pain also. They don't want more people to suffer. They don't want to lose more of the natural world that is already under terrific pressure. So this is an act of love as much as anything. as much as it's an act of protest, as much as it's an act of energy transition and technical innovation and redirecting investment. So I'm really, really proud to be part of that. I'm proud to be Canadian, and I'm proud to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much, John, for your incredibly powerful narrative in Fire Weather. I personally believe that it's essential reading for all of us. It's
Thanks.
a magnificent book. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amber to thank you on behalf of all of us. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Sure.
Karen. Well, I think Karen said it. Just thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for empowering us with knowledge and words to take forward in whatever we do, whether it's community work or organizational work. The passion and really the clarity that you bring to something that I often feel is overwhelming sometimes, often complicated. But thank you. So thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you for calling us to action this evening.